Hi everybody and welcome back to the Roxy Horror Picture Show. If you haven't clicked subscribe, please at the end of this video, if you wouldn't mind clicking that subscribe button. Thank you. Anyway, today we are going to talk about Bridget Cleary and also about Irish folklore. Now we'll start with the Irish folklore. Especially we'll talk about changelings and fairies. Now, the fairies I'm going to talk about are a lot different to the Disney fairies that you hear or see about. Back in the 17 and 1800s, any child that had any physical difference, any mental difficulties, whether they're taller than what they should be, shorter than what they should be, people believed that the soul or even the body itself was taken over by changelings. What they do is they'll see any kind of fairy that are gone sick or are ready to die, and what they do is they put them in a body of a child, and so they can grow and nurture and live out their lasting days being nurtured by the child's parents. Now, it could be a good thing, but it was also a bad thing. People back then seen it as a bad thing, like their soul was taken away. So what they used to do is when their babies were sleeping in the cribs, they'd never keep their eyes off them. They'll surround the crib with iron, because apparently fairies would never go near iron. Heat, open flames, apparently they were afraid of open flames, and even an open pair of scissors. That part I didn't really understand. I had to kind of look into that one. It was a bit weird. So that would bring us to this nursery rhyme.
Are you a witch? Are you a fairy? Are you the wife of Michael Clary?
So guys, I don't know about you, but that kind of freaked me out. Nursery rhymes, I just don't like them. I don't like them. Do you ever look up Ring Around the Rosie and see what that's actually about? Most nursery rhymes come from really bad, horrible stories. Anyway, that brings us to Bridget Cleary. Bridget Boland, she was born. She was born in 1869. And unlike most children around her area, she was very, very fortunate that her parents wanted her to have a good education so she'd get on well in life. By the time she was 18, she had her own business, dressmaking. She was very, very successful. Now, in 1887, she met this man called Michael Cleary. He lived a few towns over. He was a couple of years older, 9 years actually. She was 18, he was 27. Fell madly in love and they got married. Now, her father, he was a labourer, so unlike everybody, when they built houses, he had first pick. And he got this house, and he gave it to Bridget and Michael as a wedding present, so they'd have their own house and own security. Now, saying that, Michael was successful in his own right. He made a lot of baskets and a lot of stuff for a lot of labourers and building sites, so he made his money that way. But she still was very independent. She liked the fact that she had her own money and that she was able to look after herself, not having to rely on any man. She was very, very blessed, because not a lot of women in that back then had that. They got married, had children, became the housewife, died, that was it. She wanted more for her life. And fair play where she went out and got it. Now, when they moved into that house, the house is unfortunately built on a ring fort. A ring fort is basically where the fairies lived. You know, the little fairy rings? That's what a ring fort was. Now, in August 4th, 1987, she bought a load of chickens so she can dish out eggs on top, well, make money giving out eggs on top of a dressmaking business. Her mother unfortunately died and she had her father move in with her so she can look after him and he wouldn't be alone. So with that it came extra bills. So she did do more with the eggs than she did with the dressmaking at this stage. Now, her uncle lived the opposite side of this ring fort. And instead of going around, she walked through. She had no fear of these fairies. In fact, she actually was very interested in them. She used to leave them trinkets and everything. She even used to leave little eggs around for them. She had no fear whatsoever. But that day anyway, she went up to her cousin Jack's house so she can leave him eggs. When she got up there, he wasn't there and it was bitterly cold, but she hung around. She was there for a good 2, maybe even 3 hours waiting. And he never showed up, so she went home. But when she went home, because she was out in the cold, she was shivering. She was sitting by the fire all night. Even her husband, Michael, when he came back, he seen that she was sitting at the fire and she kept complaining that she could feel it in her bones. She could not warm up. She was desperately sick. Now, she was sick going on a good few days now at this stage. She was laid up in bed, and Michael got worried and he called out for a doctor. That took a good while before the doctor came out. When he did eventually come out to her, it was a good 2 weeks past, he diagnosed her with bronchitis and pneumonia. No wonder the poor thing couldn't get out of bed. She would have been knocked out with all the coughing. She had very, very high fevers, the poor thing. And when Michael explained to her cousin Jack what had happened, he did say that a few villagers seen her walk through the ring fort and not around. So he was convinced that there was something else going on with her, that she wasn't just sick with bronchitis or pneumonia, that was just a ploy or a show that the doctor just gave her, that in fact that she was possessed by a changeling. Michael didn't really believe it, but they got in touch with a spiritual doctor called Dennis Gaynor, and he came round and he took one look at her, and she had a very, very high fever and she was quite delirious. She was seeing things because Michael wasn't giving her medication. He confirmed the fact that she was inhabited by a changeling and gave him this milk. Now, this milk, it was cow's milk, but the cow was after birthing, and it was the first load of milk after the calf was born. And he mixed it with a load of foxglove. Now, foxglove is very poisonous anyway for humans and for animals. I mean, you're not meant to ingest it. But they mixed it up and they told her that she needs to drink it. Now, she tried drinking it and she couldn't. It was absolutely revolting. She'd spit it up every time. Michael was convinced that she wasn't her. She was a changeling, that it wasn't herself. So he'd force her to drink it, make her violently sick and force her again to drink it, to the point where he'd get a poker, leave it in the fire till it was very, very hot, and he'd burn her. So she'd open her mouth while she screamed, he'd pour the milk down her throat. It was horrible. Now, Bridget's family and Michael's family, both sides of the family, came around visiting because they wanted to see if she was okay. They didn't understand what was going on. Now, saying this, all this was going on, her father was in the house and he didn't even think to stop it, because he even believed that she was possessed by a changeling. This poor woman went through days of torture because they believed in the old Irish folklore. It was horrible. So anyway, how was she meant to get better anyway without getting her medication? She had no, especially back then. I don't know. It was horrible. But anyway, with her family surrounding her, they couldn't understand what was going on. They couldn't understand why she wasn't getting better. They couldn't understand the milk wasn't working. So they heard that bread was another thing to get the changing out of her. He would sit on her, lean his knee on her chest and force bread down her throat. Family around started freaking out. They didn't want to witness the abuse that this woman was going through, so they hid in the bedrooms and they listened to her scream. He'd stab her with hot poker irons, trying to get the changeling out of her. They continuously burnt her to the part where they ripped off her clothes and they grabbed the lamp oil and they put the lighter fluid from the lamp oil all over her body and set her alight, trying that every time she'd open her mouth, they'll shove either milk or bread down her throat. All of a sudden the screaming stopped and the family came out and found her dead on the floor. Instead of helping her or informing the local authorities, Michael convinced them that if we put her in a shallow grave where the ring fort is, that Bridget will appear, that the changeling will be dead and she will walk free and Bridget will be back. They believed, unfortunately they believed him, and they dug a shallow grave in the ring fort, covered her with sticks and clay. They went home. Michael stayed by that graveside for 3 days straight and she never appeared. The local authorities found out and they arrested him. They arrested Jack. They arrested the father and the 9 other witnesses, which are the family members. Such a horrible death for that poor woman to go through because they believed that she was a changeling. So in court, Michael did not plead guilty to murder, but he pled guilty to manslaughter, as he believed that he murdered a changeling, that he didn't murder his wife. that he murdered the changeling that was inside of her. He got 20 years. He was released after 15. Jack, weirdly enough, got 18 months. The 9 family members got between 6 to 18 months as they were all witnesses. The father only got 3 months. Now, I don't know whatever happened to the father. I don't know whatever happened to Jack or the other family members. I just know with Michael, while he was locked up, he realised that he did kill his wife. He was severely depressed. He didn't know what to do with his life. So the minute he left jail, the minute he was released, he jumped on a boat and he went to Canada, never to be heard from again. There's no record of his death, no record of anything. So there you go, that is the story of poor Bridget Cleary. Now the other unfortunate part of it is when they dug her up, they did bury her. But she's buried in an unmarked grave because none of the family members would claim her as their own. They wouldn't give a name to that poor gravestone. So the poor woman is buried on an unmarked grave. All because they believed in Irish folklore, in changelings and fairies. Thank God I wasn't born in the 1700s or 1800s, because I know for a fact everybody would think I'm a changeling or a fairy or something. I mean, come on. But the poor thing. So that is the story of Bridget Cleary. Thanks for listening, and tune in next Friday for another episode of the Roxy Horror Picture Show. Bye.